Hello, everybody. So it looks like we made it to the last day of the course here, last lecture day, and it's going to be kind of a short day. I want to make sure there's lots of lab time available. A couple points I don't like leaving things unfinished. So on that example we were making, I at least wanted to make some mobs in there that we can walk up and have our punch animation do something. And also wanted to look at the trivial parts, right? We've been looking at all the fancy tools in the game engine. I've got the example here in front of me. So we've been looking at those fancy tools like the rigid body and game object stuff directly, or the animator objects and the layer mask. And we've kind of bypassed those trivial points, right? Like the integer keeping track of hit points, an integer field for experience points or magic points that apply to how our character interacts. And that's the same as we would use in a business-based software, right? We just keep track of those numbers and use them as scalars and stuff for when we multiply. And then after we do a quick look at it, I want to end with a tip that I found about those numbers that makes them not quite so trivial, but does seem to have a nice effect on the games. Otherwise, there's the other two things I had on put on the to-do list is the reminder, the final deadline will be tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. Please make sure everything is submitted to me by then. I'm old. I wake up early in the mornings. So first thing Wednesday morning when I wake up, I will finish up any remaining grading and get the grades submitted. And I usually have that finished by 7 o'clock in the morning, long before the average computer person gets out of bed on Wednesday morning. So please make sure you get everything to me by 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. Please don't stress too much. Hopefully you've noticed I'm a pretty laid back person, and that it gets extra laid back when it's the first time I've taught a course and I'm kind of putting it together and figuring out what works and what works. That trial and error portion that can only happen in the classroom translates over to the grading criteria. So please don't let anything stress you out too much, and try to get everything to me by 11:59 p.m. tomorrow. Unless anybody had any questions, we'll jump into things.
The only question I had was I'm having trouble getting I'm going back like through the lectures, and one portion of it was like connecting the skin to the bones of the characters, because I'm doing a 2D and I'm doing it on Blender, is connecting the bones to the skin. In that, I didn't know if you wanted to go over that when we were in lab time, or
we can do that again really quick, because it's just to kind of show the process.
Yeah,
because that's an important one. So let's start with that. And then that
share my screen, or
I'll go ahead and walk through it if it's okay. And and we'll just do another one real quick. So I'll share my screen and open up Blender to start with. Because I was thinking that we can do that with just a cube, because we just need that connection point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem you're hitting is the order of selection matters.
Okay.
So
Well, I'm selecting like the skin, and it's only selecting like that one portion of the skin. It's not selecting like the whole skin, if that makes sense.
oh, I think you might be in edit mode. Do you want to share your screen with me? That might
Yeah.
work, so I can see what you're doing,
Let me just.
instead of trying to assume what the error is.
Yeah. So like when I click on something like this, it only highlights.
Oh, okay. So we want to turn all of those skins into one single one.
Okay. So
you'll select all of them.
So just.
It looks like you're on a PC, so yeah, you can. And now hit Control J, as in join.
Oh.
So now you have just one skin, and then
Okay.
the order matters. So you'll select now, deselect everything, because
Yep.
after you do that and reselect it.
And then
Yeah, after you do a
just-
join, the selection might be a little bit off internally, so you want to deselect and then reselect it.
Mhm.
Now the armature, and then you'll hit Control P to set the parent.
Wait, hold on. So Control P.
Oh, you have to select the mesh first,
Yeah, and then Shift, and Shift, and then
and yeah, Shift, and then that one, and now hit
Control.
Control P, and with automatic weights, usually works out really well.
Okay. All right.
And we can check this. So now if you select the armature, or well, actually, the first clue is over here. Notice how in the hierarchy on the right, we
Mhm.
own the armature now. And there it lists out the children. We can see the mesh icon is a child of it. So it looks like it's selected
Yep.
correct.
Okay.
Now, if you go in pose mode,
Uh,
under, let me grab my little pen. There's too many buttons here to just say them.
yeah.
Right over here.
Okay.
If you go to pose mode, you should be able to grab one of the bones and hit R to rotate it or something. Move it,
All right,
rotate
yeah.
it. Just the letter R for rotation. Yep.
Ah.
Uh-oh. Looks like the skin didn't quite come with it. Let's check the weighting. So now whenever that happens, go back to object mode, and we'll select it in a different order. So select the armature first, and then hold Shift and select the skin. And
Okay.
now if you go over to the modes and switch to weight painting mode,
Wait, paint.
it looks like it didn't register things. So you're gonna want to assign each particular one. So what you do is hold Shift and right click on a bone.
And then just right click a bone.
Yes.
And then wait, paint sample group. Wait.
Something didn't seem to come up right there. Are you holding Shift when you click it?
So
Shift, right click on any of the bones. That'll work.
okay,
And
so
that'll select just that bone.
wait, so select it. All right.
Yeah, select one of the bones.
Or no, that's not what you want. Yeah. So that selected the bone.
And now if you now if you click and drag around, it'll kind of paint some color on there as far as how much skin gets affected by that bone.
Okay.
And you'll see the
Do
colors
it manually instead of just having the computer.
Yeah, it looks like the automatic weights didn't quite catch it.
Okay.
But it should be straightforward, and it's a good thing to practice. Like you'll select the forearm and then paint so that the skin there for the forearm is the only stuff that moves.
Yeah. Okay.
See what to do on that?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, and then you'll just kind of go through that, yeah. So that way your forearm skin's the only part that moves there.
Right.
And to remove stuff, what you do is notice up here it says weight of 100.
Yeah.
If you turn that all the way down to 0, that's like an erase.
Oh, okay.
And now if you click and drag, it tries to unpaint.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. And I guess I can how do I see, is there any way to raise or lower the circle, like make it smaller or
Yes, that's the radius.
oh, okay. I see now.
Yep. And you adjust that.
20 and it'll
And you
okay.
can still zoom in and out and change the angle. So that, yeah, if you make it a small circle and then zoom way in, you'll be looking at what's essentially a pixel when you're zoomed way out.
Okay.
And yeah, so then come lab time or yeah, and that was another announcement I was going to make near the end. I'll go ahead and say it now. Lab time today, I'm going to make sure, I want to try to make sure there's plenty of that after we finish our thing. And then I have a class this evening from 6 to 10, but it's going to be really short as well. Make sure there's plenty of lab time in that as well. And then all night tonight, don't worry about the middle of the night. Send me a text. I tend to wake up and go back to bed constantly at odd hours. So I'll see it at some point all night tonight, all day tomorrow, all the way up until that final deadline. You can send me questions and I will basically be waiting to answer questions. I have a 30-minute meeting that I think is just about a free lunch, like the annual, it was another good semester sort of meeting. But other than that 30-minute meeting and class this evening, I will be sitting there with my phone, waiting for my phone to beep to let me know somebody has a questions. And yeah, even then, just send a question and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Make sure everything's addressed before final thing. So there's another one. I think it was your project that showed up, right, Andrew, on the Unity 2D one. It was throwing that weird error message.
Oh,
did you see the comments in the grade book?
I don't believe I did actually. I have a bad habit of not checking my email.
Okay, comments in the grade book. I don't think it automatically emails it, but I wanted to show you all this. So once you see the fix, you will remember this forever. And if y'all are ever wondering how I remember all this stuff, it's the same way Andrew is going to remember this little button forever now. Because once it causes problems they'll stop your program from running, it becomes it's like forever committed to memory. Like you see it out of the corner of your eye and you're going to panic and want to delete it, even if it's a situation where you actually meant to use it. I probably should have pointed it out. I think I accidentally clicked it one day when we were doing the lecture and then just deleted it real quick without describing what it was. So going back to the 2D thing for just a minute, because yeah, this is a very useful feature when you want it. But if you but the button's like a very easy spot to accidentally click on, and the icon that it leaves is really little and hard to notice. So when we were setting all this stuff up, one of the things we did was set up our animation. So we have these different green these animations. We only have one frame on each one. But hopefully you all can visualize the expansion of that. I guess I could drag a few more in sprites, and I'll drag a few more animations in. So normally we'd have a bunch of frames in the animation. And to put this in some context, I was trying to think of some classic games that would do this. And one that I thought where this would be useful was in the Mortal Kombat games, going all the way back to the original Mortal Kombat on the 16-bit Sega. The Scorpion character has that move that new players really overuse, right? Where he shoots out the grappling hook, it grabs the other player and brings them back. And some of the other ones in Mortal Kombat or Tekken or some of the other classic fighting games, another one would be where the character jumps way up in the air and comes down and hits the ground really hard and creates an earthquake going out. There's a certain part based off the animation of that special move where the opponent can no longer dodge it, right? Like with the grappling hook, Scorpion's grappling hook in Mortal Kombat, at first you have to dodge it at a specific time. And it's kind of in the middle of that animation. So we might need to call a function just somewhere in the middle of our animation, not at the end of it, not at the beginning. We don't want to sit there and calculate every single however many frames it is. Right? Same thing with that. It's a very popular one. The character jumps way up in the air and comes down and hits the ground really hard and sends out a shockwave. But after a certain point in that animation, the opponent can no longer dodge it. It has to be timed very precisely. So we want the event of, say, stopping them from dodging it to occur at a particular frame of the animation. So like maybe we want that to happen at this frame of the animation, call this function that can no longer occur. And this little icon right here kind of looks like a pencil. That's an animation event. Whoops, I did it to the wrong spot. If you added it to the wrong spot, you can just delete it. So right off the bat, you'll see that's in a very easy spot to click on. Maybe we want that to happen at this frame. So we would add that animation event, and then you'll notice, well, there's nothing that can be called right now. But once you have your script that has callable functions, we put everything in the update one. We didn't make any unique functions here. Once you have some unique functions in your script, then you'll be able to choose a function from this list that would run at that time. So like in that Mortal Kombat or a lot of the Tekken games or other fighting games, it's very common. There's that certain frame in the animation where the opponent no longer has the option to dodge it. So partway through the animation, we want to call that event and programmatically remove the ability of the opponent to dodge it. I'm going to go back to this first frame animation to show you what kind of goes wrong. And sometimes if we accidentally click that button, and this was what happened on somebody's tutorial, it's like the button accidentally got clicked because it's right next to this thing we're going to be clicking on all of the time. And there's an animation event and it doesn't call a function. And whenever we try to run the game, I guess I got to flip to the console. So I'm going to point at an error message. We get this error message. Animation event has no function name specified, which seems kind of vague. And what that error message refers to is in our animation panel, whether you dock it like I do or just have it floating and have to open it back up, there's one of those little marks. And you'll see it's really hard to see there. But if you get an extra one or see this error message, you can just right click on it and delete it. I just wanted to describe that because that is a very easy thing, very easy button to click, and it throws that error message that's hard to fix. So if you see that error message says the animation event has no function, just go to the animation panel and look for that little bitty white icon up at the top that it's kind of pencil shaped, and just delete it. Oh, this one. I tried to open my prep work for a second there. I was like, oh, that error message doesn't look good. But I already deleted the prep one. What's on this computer that referenced, but there's not really anything special here. It's actually all stuff we've seen before. So just one more pass at it. That way, hopefully you're developing an understanding of it. And at the end of class today, I'm going to send out this 2D and 3D example. That's why I went ahead and deleted that to get back to a spot that worked. For you all to use as reference. Hopefully this stuff's making sense so that you can build up more complicated and interesting parts for this when time allows. And hopefully you have some time coming up soon, right? That's the point of a break, is a chance to relax. So might be a chance to work on that. And then the 248 class, for those who are taking that, this is pretty much what we're going to do. We're just making games the whole time. So we kind of got this set up the other day. Saw those basic pieces that are very similar in 2D and 3D, moving around, set up our gateway so that when we collide with that sphere, it jumps over to this other world and all that stuff continues. Hopefully you kind of remember where that was. And once this opens, and I tried to make it a point to look at things that were very similar in 2D and 3D. So speed it moves, and we look at the components like the rigid body, the game object, the animator. And those are components.
What happened?
Our object, yeah. What was that, Andrew?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I thought I heard something. I thought you were asking a question. But we kind of set that up. our game object has all these components, and we can always access those from our script and just say what type of data it is. That's sort of the core method of using Unity. And that way, the things we need, we can access, we can use the UI panel to look for them. Because then once we have like that rigid body data, over here we have a dot mass and a dot drag, dot interpolated, dot constraints, dot freeze X, or dot freeze Y, or dot freeze Z. We can just use the dot operator to get to this list of things that normally show up over here on our UI panel. So we can use that to read those. And same thing with our inputs. It's in a different spot, but if you go to edit and project settings, one of the options is the input manager, where you can see all of the inputs you have, or rename them or reassign them if you want to. They gave them really good names. It's probably best just to go with those defaults. And if you plug up a different controller, it'll rename them anyway. Then we just picked a direction for our character to go based off those inputs, and adjusted the animation, turned in that direction, then added to that vector so that we would go downward as well, so that our character doesn't just fly if or hover in the air if we're not all the way down. And then we move that direction, sort of one of those situations where order is very important. And if we're not pushing the button, if we're not pushing any of the buttons, then just change the animation back to the standard still animation. And then on the 2D stuff, we looked at raycasting, which we also have raycasting in 3D. I guess one difference is in 3D, it's a lot better to put it in 2 steps. Better in 3D than what we did in 2. Where we set up a raycast hit variable. I'll just call it ray, but when we don't assign it. Because that physics thing, if, oops, that's spelled wrong, might as well spell it right. Physics.raycast for position, direction, out, ray, then distance and mask, layer mask. So most of that should look the same as what we did in 2D. The position, the direction we want to go to, the distance that we're casting that ray, and then what layer mask are we trying to hit. All that's the same, but you'll notice the third argument is different. The third parameter is different, and it says out. So generally these return Booleans. Remember, we were able to just check that and pull some stuff off of it. In 3D, there's even more information. So that line looks like a mess. Remember, in 2D, we just said ray equals all of this stuff and then did if ray. So this one line looks like a mess, but it'll make the rest of your code look a lot better. And the third parameter, we just say out, and that's where we're going to put the data of whatever the ray hits. So whatever this ray hits at that distance over in that direction, we're going to put it into this raycast hit variable separately, and then that'll make the rest of your code look a lot cleaner. I was trying to put that all in comments. So just something there for you to reference. It'll make your code look a little bit cleaner, but we saw raycasting. Essentially, it's the same thing. It makes things a lot, it makes everything except this one line a lot cleaner. And usually we have lots of things to do when our raycast collides with something. So having the rest of the lines cleaner makes a big difference. So all that's different is where we're going to put that data somewhere else and put that thing that in 2D, we just did an assignment because there's not as much data coming back in 2D. We just did an assignment, but here we're going to use that third parameter of out. But otherwise, it's exactly the same as we saw in raycasting. And this one we were kind of doing with collisions. So I was going to do the same thing with collisions here. Just set this up so that if we kick the blue guy, he disappears, and then we can do something with like hit points and experience points. Was what I had in mind for the trivial part. Have to wait for it to compile, even though the only change was in comments. It's like, oh, added comments, but the computer's got to recompile all those comments. So first thing, we probably need that blue guy or something to hit. So I was going to go back into our character animation where we set up all these animations and stuff, and make one little change to this guy. So they would still have all the animations and stuff. So I want to be able to tell it's the opponent. So I'm going to grab the skin and just change the material on it. Kind of like we've seen before. This little icon here in Blender that changes our material, which we can access the color. So there's the skin that's assigned. And you notice I have a second one here. If I click on that second one, it doesn't change anything. I'll do this. I'll add a new one. I'll add several new ones. I'll just call it white and go with that default color. And you'll notice when I click on these, it doesn't change. And that's because only the top material is applied. But once we have several, if I go back to that, choose the top one in the list, the one that's actually selected, then I can choose from these other ones and make that guy either white or blue. And just choose that other material to be assigned to the top thing in the list. Otherwise, the animations and everything are still the same. So I'm going to save this as something different. So save as, thumbnails are in the way. I'll just call this mob. So kind of like we've seen throughout, it's not an art class, but we can't really avoid art in this subject. So we at least want to have some Scratch stuff to work with. So I'm just going to use the Scratch character model and make it blue to have a Scratch mob object. And once again, there's lots of animations. So we want to make that we'll get the export file type that Unity prefers, the FBX. And it's going to try to export everything, but we don't need any empty stuff. That would hold data if we were going to animate it in Blender. Unity has a camera. Unity has lighting, and if we bring lighting over with this one, it will still work in Unity. So then we'll have extra lighting, and it makes it throw all the lighting off. We just want the armature and the mesh. So select both of those. Make sure the bake animation is selected. Then hit export. And then that should give us the file type that the Unity wants. There it is. And now I'm going to go kind of quick, repeat the steps we did the other day. It's a good idea to separate our logic and graphics In particular, that way we can debug the logic with scratch graphics and then more easily change them out later. So we'll create an empty object, just right click and create an empty object. I don't know, no names are springing to mind. Over here to hold all of the opponent's logic. And then we'll drag this in as a child of that to handle the graphic stuff. So to start with, I just want to make sure everything's going to work. So I'm going to move him over here where it doesn't take long for our character to walk over to him. Oh, and I'm just clicking here on these arrows to kind of get the straight on view. And F to zoom in on that. Get that a good position, not too far away from our character. And we'll want physics to apply. We want gravity to pull this down. So once again, we'll need a rigid body. And just like our character, we don't want him falling over in weird directions. So we'll freeze the rotation. That way we can, if he's going to move, rotate, or spin or something, we explicitly have control over it. Though in other situations, you're definitely going to want the realism, so that if you go up there and kick him, the character goes spinning off in the distance. Actually, that might look better, but might be a good thing to try to unfreeze those and see what it looks like. But for now, I'm just going to keep it straight, and then we'll just destroy it whenever we kick it. Then we want a collider so that we can detect that collision. Because we saw raycasting last time, so I thought I'd do collisions this time. And for general logic ideas, these things we're doing would be the same in 2D or 3D. Right? We saw all these same components. So I'm just going to set up this box close to it. That should work, maybe not sink down in the ground quite so far. We don't need to worry about the camera following this guy or anything. Did I do anything else? I guess we can go ahead and set up the animations for him. Well, maybe. I don't want to spend too much time. We've seen how to do animations and set up all this stuff for that. But if we're just going to have him there to go kick him, we might not necessarily need everything animated. Depending on how time goes, we can come back and reset all that. But that puts our character on the screen. So we should be able to walk up and bump into him at least now. Yep. You can see physics are applied, so we can push him around, which we just went over a little ridge, so that would have made him do a cartwheel and stuff if we were pushing him when that happened. And so far we're waving at him. Probably want to be able to kick him. So this is kind of something we've seen before. Where's my player character? Yeah. So we'll want to change the animations on our player character so that we have that kick option. And just like we saw before, the graphics are separate and have that animator object on them. So with that selected, we come to our animator tab. We'll see all our different animations here. We have punch and kick and jump. I'll go with kick. That wasn't a good one. So we could set up something to go from our walking to the kicking, and from the kicking back to the walking when we're done, or from the waving to the kicking, the waving to back when we're done. And we need to do this for all of them, right? The jump animation, the punch animation, and alternatively, we want to be able to kick that guy when we push the control to kick, no matter what animation is currently going on. And that's what this one over here is, the any state. So we always start an animator with entry or any state. So no matter what animation state we are in, we want to be able to translate to our walk animation. And then I'll just set it up like we've seen before. I'll set a Boolean called kick. And this transition will happen when once this catches up, kick is equal to true. And notice it gave us a warning. Does anybody see that down in the corner of my screen? There's the yellow thing pop up. So transition any state to kick state doesn't have exit time. Transitions will be ignored. That sounds kind of vague. So what the word time should be in there. Transition time will be ignored. So what that's saying is, notice in the preview, or showing the jump preview, and then right here is where it starts to transition. So it's like partly in the jump animation, partly in the kick animation, and then kind of goes through it. And that's the has exit time. So if I click this, and then maybe make some changes and come back to it. Because clicking that checkbox does not avoids that animation. But we can kind of see in the preview here what's going on with that. It has exit time. It finishes the state where it finishes the animation. So like in the case of the jump, it finishes the whole, all the frames for the jump animation and then kicks. Or walking, it'll go all the way to the end of the walking animation before it goes to the kick animation. So we probably don't want that. I'm going to leave that checked and we'll come back and undo that. We could also make it a very, very short transition time. That would be another option too, if you want to all the way finish the animation and then go right to it. But I'm gonna see what it looks like if we put that has exit time there, if we pay attention to that warning, and then we'll come back and fix it. Another important point to look, if we make transition back, you'll notice it's not letting me click to that. If I drag down here, it snaps to it anytime I'm close. So we can't transition back to any state. We can't go back to the state we were that way. So we want to come back to one of our existing states. So I'll go back to the walking state, and if their speed is still in the wrong spot, it should be okay. So the any state, that's where we use the any state transition. And then we'll transition back. This time we do want to make sure and finish all that, so we'll leave that checked, but we'll see what it looks like whenever we change that, and we'll go back to walking when kick is set to false. So then, just like we saw before, we need to set that somewhere. I'll just throw it at the end here, which isn't really the best way to do it, but it does make for a nice clean example. I'll make a floating call. Well, I'll keep the names the same, because calling this kick and calling that thing over on the UI kick only looks the same to us. The computer will never get them confused. So it's really useful for us as programmers to use those same names in different places. Makes it a lot easier to keep track of what's what. And just like we saw before, we'll call the input manager and get data about whatever input is being clicked on. I'm just gonna go with the jump. By default, that's the space bar, so that's an easy one for here. Defaults to space bar. Makes a nice easy thing for the example. Whoops. Did not want the autofill in there. Yeah. Makes a nice, easy one for the example, but there might be a better thing like the mouse click. When I was doing my prep work, I actually set it to the mouse x-axis at one point, which remember also controls our rotation of the camera. And that had a really nice effect because then every time I wanted to kick, it would also rotate the camera. So the camera would spin around and then then you would kick, which is that kick animation that probably should have been discarded if we weren't under tight time constraints. But it did make a nice little effect. If y'all want to make a note of, give that a try sometime on your kicks and punches, put it on the same thing controlling your camera, and then you get a camera spin for that kick, and it seemed to add a nice effect. But I'm gonna go with the easy for the example here. Then it's just like we saw before. If kick, which is a keyboard control, so it's a number between -1 and +1. Really, the space bar is going to go between 0 and 1. And when we're not pushing it at 0, and when we push it, it's going to very quickly go up to 1. Oops. So if we check when it's not 0, that means as soon as it starts moving towards 1, it doesn't have to get all the way there. It's going to cover every floating point number on the way between 0 and 1. Then we'll change our animation, which is just like we saw before, except I have caps lock on. Just like we saw before, we'll get our animator component and set the Boolean value for that Boolean called kick to true. And if that condition is not false, some basic selection structure for programming, if not equals 0 is false, then it has to be 0, which means we're not pressing the key. Then we want that Boolean to be set to false, which will jump back to our walking animation, and then on the next frame should adjust around to the appropriate animation. All that should look familiar. We saw that before, just another example of it. But now our character, we should be able to make our character kick and demonstrate what happens if we pay attention to that warning message that says this box should probably be checked. Oh, whoops. Did anybody notice that? Talking and typing at the same time. It's actually right above here in the code. If I scroll up, our input manager has axes. So we want to get one of the axis values from that. We want to get the jump axis, not jump input. Okay, no error messages. That's a good sign. Oh, and if you hadn't noticed, I have this docked, so it's going to look kind of strange. But if I go over to this panel, which I think I can do here, you'll see that the animation's running. Right now it's in the waving animation. And if I press the key, oh, I have to come in here. Start walking, you'll see it change to that other animation. Oh, well, it stopped because we went over here, but hopefully you saw that for a second. So if that's not docked, you can actually pull it out somewhere. There we go. If it's not docked, then you can see the animation happening. Oh, I guess it has to be docked somewhere. I'll dock it down here. So we're in the idle animation. If I start walking the other way, you'll see that we can see the transitions between the animations and stuff. So there is that graphical representation. And no code solutions which are becoming more and more popular in the industry as a whole, because humans are prone to making typos, and this is kind of confusing. But if we have pictures and visual representations, it's kind of nice. I was at a meeting last week for Intel just put together an AI curriculum for community colleges, because the research is kind of finishing up. So now they don't need people with masters and doctorates to do the AI. That's being implemented in the field, and everybody that's been studying it has masters and doctorates. So Intel was like, okay, we got to make some changes here. We need the boots on the floor people that can do this. So they put together community college curriculums for AI, actually working on it. And they did it with low code solutions, the dragging and dropping, because that's becoming more and more popular for the industry. I just thought I would mention that formal training in AI might be heading our way soon at the community college level. Yeah, like very, very soon. Like industry has already implemented it because it sounded so interesting. But the people that know it all have PhDs and doctorates. So they aren't the people that just go work at these common companies that have started implementing it, right? So like might be heading this way in a rush, not something that is like, oh, we can see it off in the future. It's like there's an urgency to get that implemented as soon as possible in lots of places. Oh, a side note, but we should be able to make our character kick. I forgot to do that when we were doing it. So we can wave. If I hit the space bar, it kicks. But notice, so I'll move down very quickly. So as soon as my finger leaves the camera area, that's when I'm hitting the space bar, basically. You saw that delay, right? Same thing when we're walking. We'll walk, then hit space bar, and it's a minute before that registers. And that's what that exit time check mark is. So for something like an attack, I think it was this one, we probably don't want the exit time. We want that to happen immediately. So it'll give a warning message, but it's yellow, it's not red. We can ignore it. It's okay to ignore the yellow ones. Just not the best idea. Which obviously it might be better to go to that timeline thing and squeeze everything down and choose where that transition happens and whatnot. Now, if I do the same thing, notice as soon as my finger went down, it switched to that. Or here, if you pay close attention, you'll notice when he starts walking, it's with his left foot. Always start on the left foot. Can you tell I spent a lot of time in marching band in high school? He starts walking on his left foot. So if I push that button when he's on his left foot, that's the beginning of the frame, and you can see he kicked immediately. So for things like attack, you probably want to make sure the has exit time is not checked. Because basically what that means is it's going to finish the current animation and then transition to the new one. So all of that should have seemed familiar. I guess the new thing is to deal with the has exit time, and we use the any event so that we didn't have to do transitions from our walking to our kicking, and from our waving to our kicking, and from the jumping to the kicking or the punching to the kicking. We're able to do that all with one transition to it, and then just one transition out of it, instead of making lots and lots of transitions. So you just want to, as you put things together, think about where that would apply. And keep it organized. You can already see that things are going behind other things, or things are in front of other things, which it's a hint that that's going to get very cluttered very quickly. Organization goes a long way. So now we need to hit our character, basically. And I put the raycast in a note, and then we'll use the collision stuff again. So if our collision is the gateway, we'll check and see which one of which scene we're in, and then go to the next one. So here's what ends that. This text editor I have doesn't mark it very well, but you can kind of see under this curly brace, there's a blue line, and way up here is the other blue line. So that's what ends this one. So we can put an else if here, is maybe if it's not the gateway we collided with, but if that collision dot game object dot, well, gateway was easy. There was only one of them, right? But it wouldn't be much of a game if there was only one of these guys. So as soon as we get him working, we're going to copy and paste that in like 10 different places. Copy and paste 10 of them around. So it's going to, so just using the hierarchical name might not work. So we could set up the layer, because the game object has a dot layer. But we already seen that, and I want to look at as many tools as possible here in like preview mode. Another very popular one is to use tags. So we can, here's some generic tags that we start with about things, or we can add one specifically for our blue guys. So I'll add a new custom tag called blue guy. And then we have to apply that as well. It's kind of like when we did the layers, we create a new one, but creating it only creates it. Applying it is still a second step. So we'll come back and select that, and then give him this blue guy tag. That's a very popular way to access stuff, because then we have a lot more control over what it is. And then the tags are always a string. So whatever we collided with, well, we assigned a tag to the things we're worried about. So if that tag is equal to blue guy, then we know that collision happened. So name is the hierarchical name, and tags and layers we can assign. And the tags are a very popular way to do it, because then we just get a normal string. Strings are written language. That's the way we normally communicate, right? That works well with our mind. So tags are a very popular way to check for things like that. In this case, I'm just going to throw up a message. You probably want to do something more interesting than throw up a message. Got a hit plus collision.game object.name. I will use the name this time to say what we hit. So I'm going to come back and adjust that after we run it. Does anybody have a guess as to what the adjustment I'm going to do is? So that might not quite be the total thing we want, right? I'll go ahead and hit run. And walk over there. And we have those box colliders, so we can run right into him. But that might not be exactly what we want, right? We don't want to just run into the guy. We want to run into the guy and kick him, which is our normal logic for programming. We want two things to happen, and it has to be explicitly both of them. We have to be colliding with the guy and in our kicking animation. And, well, like I just said, both of those things, and in our kicking animation. So we'll need to access the animator object, and we can just get the state of that Boolean. Because this is either true or false. And whenever it's true, we are going through that kicking animation. So if that's true, then all this right here is just a really complicated way to write the word true, which itself is just a more complicated way to write a 1 instead of a 0. But it counts as true. our if condition will count as true, and then we'll get a hit because both things are happening like we need. And there's lots and lots and lots of that as we build games, layers and layers and layers. Y'all have probably noticed that our conditions and stuff start to get complicated very quickly. You probably noticed as things come together, we don't end up with a lot of simple conditions. They add up and we want a lot of things happening at once. Because colliding but that number's not necessarily going up, right? Oh, yeah, it is. Why'd that go up? If we're hitting space, it's true. If we're not, it's false. So if we collide and it's true, let me try that again. So if we go over here and when we collide with him, oh, it is still reading. Did I save that? Oh, no, got the blue dot. I did not save it. So let's try it with that code. Uh-oh. That closes that one. That closes that one. So it looks like we got an extra curly brace and it said I was missing a semicolon. Those others might have just been overlaps from that. Yeah, the other ones were just overlapping because there was an extra symbol there. So it was thinking there should be more stuff. It's like, oh, there's a closing parenthesis. We should probably have some semicolons and curly braces before a closing parenthesis. Y'all have probably seen that before with error messages and stuff, right? There's sometimes extra stuff in there. All right, so now with that code actually saved, you notice when I run into him, we're not getting a collision. There's nothing down here in the console. If I run into him and kick, there we go. Now it counts as a collision. So you have to be in the right spot and kick him, and that could definitely use some refinement. Size of the bounding boxes, little adjustments, but the basic idea is there. So hopefully y'all will be able to take that and run. And yeah, we probably want to do something better. I'll just destroy it. Collision.game object. Oops. So if we actually get that hit, we'll just go ahead and destroy it. It might look better just to knock him down, rotate him around the x-axis or z-axis or something so he lays on the ground. A touch of realism, but we saw rotation, so I don't want to add more clutter than is necessary to the example. There's enough just in the bare minimum for gaming, right? So we get up there and kick him. Oh. Is it not working now? There it goes. Okay, not sure why that wasn't working. But yeah, it just kind of deletes him from the thing. There's probably better things to do than that. I'll put that as a note in here. Probably better stuff to do here. But that gets it more we're doing something, right? So what time is it? 2:02. So there's another thing I want to look at. And now's probably a good time for a break. That way we don't take a break in the middle of something. 10 minutes from now, what would be the ideal time for a break for our class length? But I want to look at the trivial stuff because we've just skimmed right over that, right? I want to at least include it. The things that just integers to count our health, or a floating point number from 0 to 1 to keep percentage of health, or hit points and experience points that increase over time. Magic points follow in those same lines, and different things like that. Because then I want to make it share with you a tip that I found really makes a difference in applying those things. Does 10 minutes sound good for a break? Anybody? Okay, I see a thumbs up. So yeah, so it's 2:03. We'll get back to it at 2:13 with that trivial stuff, and then finish up with a tip that I have. So that's only going to be a few minutes, and then lots and lots of lab time to get everything finished. So I'll see y'all at 2:13.